My name is Daniel Hernandez, and my main career is a real estate developer and an urban planner. I've always been interested in cities and neighborhoods and the way people live in buildings and on the streets of cities, and I love just watching cities grow. And so I originally studied architecture, and I thought I wanted to build buildings. But what I learned just in the beginning of my career was I wanted to do more than what just build buildings, but I wanted to figure out how things get financed and built and all the politics and economics of building neighborhoods and cities. So I found that real estate development was a much better way for me to express my creativity and my thoughts around creating really good neighborhoods. And lately I've begun to think more about what livable neighborhoods are, what lovable neighborhoods are, places where people really want to live and thrive and move to and stay and raise their family. Those are the kind of places I really wanted to build. So I think that everyone sort of sees various types of neighborhoods throughout their life. Some of them they love and some of them they think are really awful. And I wanted to figure out the ways that I can actually create great neighborhoods and great buildings within them. I've always loved looking at neighborhoods ever since I was a little kid. We moved around a lot when I was young, and so I had the opportunity to live in different types of places. And it wasn't until later in life that I thought about building buildings, and that was probably not until I was probably post-college. I remember actually feeling like I'm supposed to know what I do in college. I remember the last semester of school when I was in university that I still hadn't claimed a major. So I had a lot of credits in sociology and psychology. I ended up getting a degree in that. It wasn't until after I finished school and I started working, I started seeing the world in different ways that I didn't as a young person. So my thought was I really needed that time to actually become an adult and mature before I made a decision about what I was going to do and practice professionally for the rest of my life. So I didn't go back to architecture school, graduate school, till I was 26. And then from then I practiced architecture for a few years. And it wasn't until I was probably about 30, 32, that I met a real estate developer who basically took me under her wings and taught me how to finance buildings and become a real estate developer. Probably the most important skill to have as a real estate developer or an urban planner, and I can talk a little bit more about urban planning, but just being incredibly organized, first of all, that you have to love being at the hub of a wheel, basically, that you're basically conducting all these different disciplines to build something. So it's engineers and it's architects, it's bankers, it's investors, it's local neighbors who are noticing that something's going to happen in their neighborhood. So being able to talk to them, it's the elected officials, it's the mayor, it's government agencies, but you're constantly interfacing and negotiating with all those different perspectives, and just to put a building together, let alone a large neighborhood. So it's someone who really can think in a multidisciplinary way and being able to communicate with a broad range of people, from everyone to Mrs. Smith, who has a concern on her block, to the mayor, who wants to make sure that that's the right building during his tenure as mayor, to an investor who wants to make sure that he gets back a return on his dollar. So you're constantly thinking and talking at different levels throughout the course of a day, definitely throughout the course of a week and month. You know, I would say that I'm really glad that I had a multidisciplinary education. I mean, I said that I graduated an undergraduate school in psychology and sociology. It helped me just actually understand human behavior, getting along in the world, and And that was really an important discipline, actually, that led into architecture, which is building buildings for people, the way that people actually experience buildings and interact with each other in buildings. So that built on each other, those two disciplines. And then finally, real estate development was all about learning finance, and it was about learning how cities get built. So I think I think all of those are tools, and I think it was actually urban planning that really helped me understand all the dynamics of city building. Because in urban planning, you begin to understand how lots on a street are made, how streets and blocks and everything that has to come together, open space, how everything has to come together to create a neighborhood or a city. And so it helped me understand the economics of cities, it helped me understand the sociology of cities, and it was understanding that then I was able to actually build buildings and engage people in the development of buildings. Now, not everyone and not every real estate developer is an urban planner. And I think that there are some amazing developers in the world, and I think that there's not so respectable real estate developers in the world. And I think it takes someone who's interested in people and the way people live in places, creating diversity or opportunities for diversity, that makes a really good real estate developer. The opportunity that's given me to travel. Being a real estate developer and an urban planner allows me to actually live pretty much anywhere in the world and be able to practice. There are some local kind of issues that you have to learn, but I have been able to practice all over the United States, as well as in outlying jurisdictions like Costa Rica and Mexico and Brazil and Japan. So it's actually it's taken me to a variety of places to practice my skills. The biggest challenges of being an urban planner and a real estate developer are related to, for me, the biggest challenges have been being able to overcome people's willingness to remain ignorant. People often will, most of the projects that I develop require some sort of community process in which people talk about things that they like or don't like and the values that they want to protect and facilitate in their neighborhood. But there are some people who are willing to approach the microphone with their first words out of their mouth is no. And it doesn't allow for a dialogue to happen, and they willfully ignore information just to protect their position. And the world changes every day, and I feel like the challenge has been for me to be able to engage and interact with those people who approach the world with the first response as being no. I feel like I've always responded to the world in interesting possibilities. There's all sorts of answers to a problem, and I want to find the best one. And I guess I want other people to engage the world that way. So it's been a challenge engaging a broad public spectrum. But it's also been some of the most rewarding moments in my life when I've actually been able to get projects built that end up to be places that people love. I would say travel, see the world, see how things get built, the history of cities, the history of neighborhoods and how different people live. I would say that's a great starting point. But on the technical side and on the professional development side, I would say definitely learn architecture and urban planning, get some finance skills as well, and I think engage lots of people, participate in your neighborhood, in your city, join clubs, join civic institutions in which people are doing stuff in their community, and then become part of a way of building that neighborhood and building that community. A typical workday in my profession can range, again, like I was saying earlier, the typical workday can range anything from sitting in a very high-powered meeting with bankers and investors, all wearing suit and ties, to sitting in someone's living room talking about a project that is going to be happening in their neighborhood, to a community organization that wants to make sure that we're investing dollars in the public infrastructure like the library, the local school, or the local park. And all of those happen sometimes in a day's time. I just remember sometimes coming home at the end of the day, being in someone's apartment and then running downtown to Bank of America or some bank institution and talk about the project and asking for millions of dollars to finance it. So it's a wide range in a day, but a lot of it is just problem solving with people on your team. And that's been the most fun part, actually, is putting a good team together and just addressing the problems as they come up together. Currently, I work probably about 40 hours, 30 to 40 hours, but that is very new. In my career, I was working anywhere between 50 and 60 hours a week, and that stopped last year when I feel like I'm at the back end of my profession now. But as an executive, I had teams of staff people. I didn't want them to work as hard as I did. I would send them home. I would make sure that they try to get, around 40 hours a week in and leave. But many of them were as energetic as I was, and they would take work home and also be working 50, 60 hours a week. But the interesting part is everyone that I know that has worked in my profession has really, truly loved it. So they don't see that extra work as a burden or someone making them do it. They're interested in learning, and they're interested in just kind of continually expanding their understanding of our craft as real estate developers. Real estate developers actually have been growing. The profession of real estate developers has been growing ever since since I got into it, and it's because you can be a developer that is doing small homes, single-family homes, and get access to financing to do that. Or you could be a developer that's building multi-story high skyscrapers in some of our major cities. And you can be a developer working for those developers and become one of those developers. So the range or the type of developers has really greatly expanded over the past few decades. So it's definitely a field that has grown and will continue to grow. The field of developers has changed, though. I think we all know developers and have bad ideas about who they are. Many of us do. But what has also grown since I started becoming a developer are developers who are act in very socially responsible ways. They're building affordable housing in cities as well as market rate housing building in cities. They're wanting to help build out the local library and the local park. They're helping to contribute to the communities in which they invest. On the money side of things, they see that as a positive because they're investing in the areas where they are investing themselves, and they're investing in the community infrastructure. But on the socially responsible part, they're also building in neighborhoods that need help. And so it's great to see these neighborhoods come back to life and or become a stronger community due to sort of the right kind of socially responsible development that's happening in those communities. I think that the real estate development world will continue to evolve. Even within the past decade, there've become a whole slew of developers who are now interested in building green, meaning that their buildings are now passively responding to solar dynamics, weather dynamics, water dynamics, and everything else that buildings have to provide and address. So there's been a whole new group of developers that are really interested in environmentally responsible buildings. And then there's a whole new group of developers, many of them the same, who are also interested in socially responsible development as well, building out parks and playgrounds while building housing for the people who live in that neighborhood. So I think that will continue to evolve. There's financing available for that type of work. And again, the local officials and communities love seeing that type of developer come into their neighborhood versus that old type of developer who goes in and leaves and doesn't necessarily contribute for the long haul in that neighborhood. I think those developers will become antiquated after a while, and we'll see more and more socially responsible development happening. Urban planners can make anywhere between $80,000 to $120,000 a year. Real estate developers typically make more because they're managing a lot of financial risk. And so their salaries can range anywhere from 120 to 200 to 300 to 400, but it also depends on whether you're a developer working for a developer or whether you're a developer that has been able to sort of amass a lot of capital and/or is the executive of a extremely large national or multinational real estate development company, and those developers can make close to $1 million a year. So that's all to say that it just depends on where on the scale and the type of development that particular real estate developer is doing. You can make a wide range of salary. The negative to the job is that there are dips in the financial markets. And so when the economy is slow, developers are frequently not working as much because they're not able to access financing for their projects. So that's the risky part in the profession. But a lot of developers will diversify their portfolio and their development strategy. So oftentimes when there's a slow market, developers will look at acquiring buildings. And the skill sets for that are typically someone who really understands how to finance and putting financing together to be able to acquire buildings and understand the operating budgets for those buildings and make sure that they actually meet the financial objectives of the owner. But so those are the slow times, but again, a smart real estate developer diversifies their portfolio and their strategy. Again, people in the real estate industry get laid off when there's a slow market. There's just not as much work going on because not as much development is happening. So that's typically when someone gets laid off in the real estate industry. In urban planning and real estate development, you can really work in so many different fields. I mean, again, you can work for a small developer building single-family houses, or you can be that person doing that. You can work in government agencies. There's housing agencies. There's economic development agencies, both at the city and the state and the federal levels. So if you're ever interested in public sector work, there's a wide range of demand in government agencies for people who have skills in real estate development and urban planning. I spend most of my day, the largest percentage of my day is spent writing, writing notes from project meetings. It's important to track what has been decided at project meetings because there's a lot of risk and liabilities associated with people's decisions at these meetings. So I would say maybe 50% of my time is spent doing that. I also spend a lot of time just researching because I want to make sure that I'm ahead of the learning curve and what's happening in the real estate industry. So I'm researching finance issues, I'm researching just good architecture, good buildings, good best practices. And then the other piece, probably about another 20%, is spent on just doing spreadsheets, whether it's putting together a financial spreadsheet or I'm developing a schedule for a project and reworking the schedule. That's also probably about 20%. But I would say that there's three major elements of my day or my week. which is what a project manager always thinks about. It's about schedule, it's about the scope of work, meaning the project that you're working on, and it's about the budget, so that you're making sure you're putting the right budget together and then managing that budget throughout the life of a project. And a project can last anywhere from 2 years to 5 years from the day that you start thinking about it to the day that the doors open. So you're constantly managing those three things throughout the day. I think, one of the things that I always think about my career is that it's just been a multidisciplinary learning curve throughout it. Again, I started out in psychology, went into urban planning and architecture, and ended up in real estate development. But I think that, as one decides what their career path is or what their career is, being open to being open to and responding to things that you know that you like, and just pursuing what type of careers are associated with that. I didn't even know what real estate development was when I was a kid. I knew what an architect was because of best friend's dad was an architect, but I didn't know what you had to study to become an architect. I just knew that those were things that I liked. And again, it wasn't until later in life that I rethought about all these wonderful things that I loved as a kid, and reconnected with them later. So I'd say just keeping your mind and soul open to things that excite you and things that you love, and try to identify work that's associated with those things.